And welcome to this week's episode of the Inclusive Networker podcast. This is your host, Dr. Ramona, and who are we calling in to conversation today? Well, it's Mario Carrasco. He is co-founder and principal at Think Now, a technology-driven cultural insights agency. And I am so very excited to have you, Mario, as my guest. So welcome to the Inclusive Networker podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Ramona. Excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's just jump right in. The first question that I always like to ask people is, what is your lens? What's your background? How did you get here? Who are you?
Love that. I love the framing lens. Yeah, so my lens is my background's in marketing. I've been working pretty much my whole career focused on multicultural consumers. And
Mm,
so how do we define multicultural consumers in the US? It's Hispanic, Latino, Black, Asian, and now that terminology is growing more to include LGBTQ, um, disabled people. So really, the way to
mm,
think about multicultural consumers are those consumers that are typically overlooked by large corporations. So my background is digital marketing. About 15 years ago, I made the transition into data and really found my passion there. Realized that I love reaching multicultural consumers, but I feel like every marketing campaign, successful ones that reach consumers, start with data versus
mm-hmm.
assumptions, right? I know we've had a conversation before. It's so
Yeah.
easy to stereotype or make assumptions about these consumers. But with the work that we do at Think Now, we help mainly Fortune 500 companies. So the Target, Meta, um, AARPs of the world do research on how multicultural consumers are purchasing, using their products, and we help them give them data so they could craft marketing campaigns that lets them connect authentically with these consumers.
Awesome. And so I want the inclusive networker community to know that you are working with some big companies and you are bringing this information to us. So we are so very thankful that we're getting to translate all of your knowledge to the work that we do in network marketing and in smaller businesses. Because think about this community, when somebody is working with a company like Meta, which is Facebook, right? Or when we're talking about Target and all of these places, these companies have some really, really great systems and the ability to reach large numbers of people. And so it's so exciting to get to translate that to the work that we're doing. So thank you so much for being here.
For sure. And I mean, I think I love what you're doing for the network marketing community because, yes, we're working with big companies and big brands, but I think you all have a really unique insight into people on the ground, right? Those are the people that
Mm-hmm.
companies ultimately want to reach. It doesn't matter how big you are. And so having those conversations at the ground level with actual customers and consumers is valuable. I mean, that's what we do,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're out there talking to people through surveys, getting their insights, having them answer questions, and we want to be that conduit. I think network marketers, network marketing companies really have access to these consumers that these big corporations are looking to reach. So it's all about how do you try? I mean, one, answer asking the right questions, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, so much of marketing is more about listening versus telling, and how do you
Yeah.
translate that in a culturally relevant way?
Yeah, love it, love it. Okay. So as we think about Think Now, tell me a little bit more about what you do. So I know we're talking about data, we're talking about multicultural communities, but tell us a little bit more about what happens at Think Now.
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of example of our work, and I think that's the best way for me to explain. So one of our big clients is Honda, and
Mm,
Honda's a great example of a company that's invested in multicultural consumers over the years, um, specifically with the Latino community. So they're actually, for the past decade, have been number one in terms of go-to brand for Latinos in the U.S., which represent
Mm.
20% of the population in the U.S. And that's because they've been putting in the work. And so, one of my favorite studies that gives you insight into what Think Now does is Honda knew that they were number one consideration among Latinos in the U.S. Um, Another statistic that they knew is that Latinos are really driving the purchase of pickup trucks more than any other consumer in the US. And
Okay.
so they were going to be launching a truck called the Honda Ridgeline. And they thought, we have the number one consideration set among Latinos. Latinos purchase trucks more than any other consumer. Like this is going to be a home run. When it launched, it actually wasn't. And so what Honda did is they wanted to do a study to see what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Why was the Honda Ridgeline not a success? And then so they hired us, and they actually, instead of doing research to understand, why specifically their truck didn't work, they wanted to know what's behind Latinos purchasing trucks. And I think many companies wouldn't have taken that step, and they would have just assumed and made
Mm.
stereotypes about Latinos that they over-index in trucks because that's the type of work they do. And yeah, Latinos do, there's a large concentration of Latinos in construction type work, but that isn't the full picture. So Honda wanted to
Okay.
understand like why do Latinos buy trucks? And so they hired us to do research, and we did research among Latinos and non-Latino truck owners so that we understand, both sides and have the full picture there. And what we found is that, a pain point for non-Latino truck owners was that phone call on the weekend, like, "Hey, Dr. Ramona, what are you doing? I
Mm-hmm.
need help moving this item, or moving." Right?
Yeah.
That's
Yep.
something non-Latinos didn't, that said that was a pain point.
Mm-hmm.
What was really interesting is for Latinos, we found out that that wasn't a pain point. In fact, it was one of the reasons that they purchased trucks. They wanted to be that go-to person in the family and friends group that
Family.
needed help, right? And
Yeah.
it was a small insight, but Honda took that and created a whole campaign to promote the Honda Ridgeline about being that go-to person in your friends and family group. And so that's a really my favorite example of the work we do,
Yes.
right? We do research to understand what are the differences, what's driving these purchases, um, and give companies a way to authentically connect as opposed to making the stereotype, which Honda could have easily done, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
assume, okay, well, let's put Latinos in construction or whatever it may be, which is a great job, but it wasn't at the core of why Latinos purchase truck. It was about being that go-to person, and so that's the type of work that we do. Helping companies gain insights, these unique insights that allow them to
Mm-hmm.
create marketing campaigns that connect with consumers authentically.
Wow. That is just an awesome example. I love that. And so, um, so Hyundai created the campaign. So was it commercials? Like what types of things did they do when they
Yeah.
created that campaign?
Yeah, so they created 30-second commercials. You can find them.
Mhm.
Honda Ridgeline, they created it both in English and Spanish, and it's kind of a
Okay.
funny commercial. Like, um, it's a guy that's like dating someone, and said like helping them out, and through different scenarios, right? Going to the beach with the
Uh-huh.
truck and moving something, and but like happy to do it.
Yeah, yeah, fun. Okay, so so as we're thinking about these multicultural customers and communities, tell us what kind of trends you're starting to see. So whether it be with the Hispanic community or with any multicultural consumers, what are you seeing right now?
Yeah. So um, I mean, right now, I think what we're seeing unfortunately is kind of a slight um, backlash in multicultural consumer marketing, which is unfortunate. But I think that's
Okay.
a small minority of consumers kind of speaking out against it. But if we look at the data, um, and I think this is the reason why there's a backlash, is that the U.S. is changing, right? I mean,
Mhm.
the U.S. is becoming more multicultural and more diverse, and I think we're seeing a backlash that people there's a fear of change, but
So when you say backlash, let's tell unpack that a little bit. And
yeah, I
so
mean, I think,
who
you would look at recently, right? I mean, it's June 2nd, Pride Month just launched. We've had a lot of
Mhm.
backlash with Pride Month. I mean, it started with Bud Light,
Mhm.
and then you see Target,
Okay.
PetSmart now, Kohl's, companies that are you know want to show that they're inclusive of their LGBTQ consumers. Um, and we're seeing, kind of a social media backlash on that, which is unfortunate.
Mhm.
Um, but I think, you know, we've seen, I think Bud Light fumbled a response there and kind of backed up. The majority of people in this country believe in inclusivity. Um,
Mhm.
and whether you believe in it or not, like that is where the country, where the world is headed, to be a more inclusive society. And I think Bud Light fumbled it because they tried to step it back, and they
Mhm.
upset both consumers. They upset,
Yep.
the consumers that were against it, and they upset the consumers that were for it. And I think that's a really important insight, is like, if you're going to do this work, there's going to be potentially backlash, but you have to
Mhm.
know that um, you have to be authentic, right? And so flip
Yeah. Take
flopping
a
is not
stand on
really a
one
thing.
one side or the other, but you got to stay
Yeah,
on one.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
know that the data is on your side.
Mhm.
Again, like,
Yeah.
where is the growth coming from? Multicultural,
Mhm.
diverse consumers. The
Mhm.
majority of people support, more inclusivity, and so that's really important. And I didn't mean to start it on kind of a negative note. Another trend I'm seeing is that brands are really leaning into that, right? And being much more
Mhm.
specific. It used to be, I've been in this industry for 15 years. Um, Multicultural marketing was just like one campaign, one commercial with people of different backgrounds, right?
Mhm.
And a
Mhm.
diverse cast. But now companies are really getting really specific, learning about not only just Latinos, maybe Latino gamers, right?
Mhm.
Um, and they're learning about, or they're making very specific campaign, Black consumers that are into comics. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's another trend that we're seeing, is that really being specific and intentional with marketing campaigns, and nothing is too niche.
Mhm. Okay. And so, as we think about network marketers or small business owners, then how do we translate that? And so, as we are starting to gather information about diverse communities, then how do we really niche down and go down to that specificity that we're seeing these other bigger companies do?
Yeah, I mean, I think with network marketing, you have a really great opportunity, right? Is that um, I think most people think they want to cast a really wide net, and that's how you
Mm-hmm.
connect with the most people. But I think the opposite is true. So with network marketing, you're typically starting around in your community. I think you have to kind of look at your community. What is the demographic makeup? Um, and you can start with demographics, but also like things that you're particularly interested in, right? So I like the outdoors. I like mountain biking. That's a very niche
Mm-hmm.
community. Um, but if I were in network marketing, that's something that I would tap into, because I'm knowledgeable about it. Um,
Absolutely.
and the thing about getting niche is that I think the first reaction about niche marketing is that the pie is too small, it's too
Mhm.
specific to a consumer. Um, but an interesting thing happens is that when you really focus in on a very specific consumer, not only do you capture that consumer, but other people start to um, resonate that with because it's authentic. And so I think one of my
Mhm.
favorite examples is like Netflix has very like niche specific shows, which I think is great about streaming. Like it gets into cultures and backgrounds and stories that I've
Mhm.
never been exposed to.
Yeah.
And yet we all relate and watch them, right? Even though it's about a person that is so different from us in a different country, right? Like I've been watching Netflix stuff from countries that, I don't know the language and reading the subtitles, but
Right.
because it's authentic, like it resonates with me and it resonates with a lot of
Mhm.
people. And so I think that's something that network marketers can tap into is don't be afraid to get too niche. Um,
Mhm.
Start with your community, start with things that you're interested in, and tap into those communities and really lean in. And you'll see that it's going to not only help you create a connection with that niche community, but it will also have a halo effect as people start to see that
Mhm.
you're being authentic.
Yes, love that. And so, there's something that I've heard you talking about, and I have seen it. It's this idea of zero party
Mm,
data. Okay, so
yeah.
tell us a little bit about what that is and how do we use it? How do we tap into those types of data?
Yeah. So zero party data. So the thing that drove our company to get into zero party data is that um, in 2024, cookies are going to be sunset. And so what cookies are is like a little snippet of code
Mhm.
that follows you around on the internet, right? So if you've ever Googled, you know, for shoes or a shirt,
Yeah.
and then you see that everywhere you go.
On Facebook ads.
Yeah, on Facebook ads, right? Like
Yes, we've all done.
that's a
That's a
cookie.
cookie. Ah, okay.
And I'm not sure. I'm assuming that network marketers use digital advertising in some sense, right? And so um, once those cookies sunset, you're no longer as a marketer. That's like one of the biggest tools being used right now to target people,
Mhm.
right? And so what zero party data is a solution for when cookies go away. And all zero party data is survey data, or I should say, it's not survey data. It's asking people their opinions directly, and you give it to me in exchange for something, typically an incentive. Um,
Mhm.
and so, how do network marketers tap into that? I mentioned earlier, you're on the ground talking to people. Start asking questions, right? That's zero party data, right?
Okay.
Start asking questions. Start gathering data about your consumer or potential consumer, and it doesn't have to be a fancy survey. It could be paper and pencil. It could be a survey, but the more data you start gathering now, the better equipped you're going to be for when cookies go away. And even if you're not using digital marketing as a network marketer, it's super valuable to have zero party data because maybe you ask the same 5 questions every single time. You can start to see how those change over time and better
Mhm.
adjust your marketing strategy or your sales strategy. You start to see, hey, people are less interested in this and more interested in that. So zero party data is just about gathering data. And so start with something, don't overthink it. But I would say,
Mhm.
just start asking questions. And it could be basic things like how old is your consumer? Right? Like,
Mhm.
how old is your consumer? What type of industry do they typically work in? So you can start creating personas. Okay, my consumer tends to be this age and works in this industry and interested in these things.
Mhm.
And just having that data is going to make you a better network marketer.
Okay. So why are cookies going away? So what's happening
Yeah,
in the field and in the industry that's causing that? Is it because privacy issues
that's
and
exactly it.
okay.
Yeah, so the US is super far behind in terms of data legislation. So
Oh, okay.
if you
The
look at Europe,
European, yeah.
yeah, they're
Mhm.
like
Yep.
they have great data privacy laws. And
Yeah.
I was just listening, like they already are putting into legislation AI laws
Mhm.
about you're going to have to watermark when a video is AI generated. Like
Okay.
that's not going to happen in the US until 10 years, right? And so
Mhm.
um, Europe has had GDPR for like 5+ years. That's
Yep.
just starting to trickle over into the US. And so it's
Mhm.
all about data privacy. And so, set yourself up for the eventual, data privacy laws that are coming. And zero party data is great because it's data you own. You ask somebody and they said, yes, you can have this, and you start to create your own database, you're going to be far ahead of your competition if you already have data on your consumers because that's going to go
Mhm.
away.
Okay. Oh, this is good. So, as we're thinking about now, we have this zero party data, right? So we've got all this, we've gathered this information. Now, how do we authentically translate this into action? And so, with network marketers, typically we're selling products. It might be skincare, nutrition, clothing. There could be a number of different things. How do we authentically translate that data and then start to connect with these multicultural communities?
Yeah. So I think if your products, I think I'll give you an example. One of the biggest promotions that large companies do is around holidays.
Mhm.
So maybe a question you ask is what holidays that you celebrate, and that's different among cultures, right? That's a very culturally
Mhm.
specific thing, right? So,
Mhm.
um, Latinos, you have some celebrate Dia de los Muertos. Um, Asian consumers, it's Lunar New Year. I think a holiday among Black consumers that non-Black consumers are starting to recognize is Juneteenth. So
Mhm.
you can start to gather that data, right? What holidays are you celebrating? And if you're selling product and you start to figure out, hey, I know this niche of consumers is celebrating Dia de los Muertos, you can create some custom marketing campaigns that signal to consumers that you took the time to understand what they celebrate, and you could start to send them
Mhm.
a promotion on that. I
Mhm.
think that's
Okay.
one example there.
Okay. And so I know a lot of times, people hear these types of things and then they just jump on it and they're like, okay, how do we find all uh, this type of community or that type of community? And let's just go make a campaign. I think that it's important to avoid that piece, right? And the inauthenticity that would
For
happen
sure.
as a result of just moving into that too quickly. And so what are some things that you caution us against? Even
Yeah.
though we say yes, let's do this, let's connect with communities. What is the process for that so that we can ensure that people are not ruining relationships with
No, I
multicultural
appreciate you bringing
communities?
that up because yeah, I could open up a can of worms by just yeah.
Okay, go ahead,
The,
open it.
no, I mean I think I think Target has done a really good job in terms of connecting authentically with
Hmm.
consumers around holidays that are specific to them. One thing that they've done, and I don't know necessarily how you would translate this into network marketing. Oh no, yes, I do. Um, is like they work with people from the community. So
Hmm.
instead of Target just saying, hey, we're going to do a Dia de los Muertos promotions and get our people to do creative, they hire someone from the community to help them create promotions. And that's authentic. And so
Hmm.
how does network marketing, do that is like working with people like you, right? Like
Hmm. Hmm.
you look, hey, I know that my consumer expects X, Y, and Z. I'm going to consult with Dr. Ramona as opposed to just me doing my own promotion, right? So
Yeah.
working
Yeah.
with people in the community is the best way to do it because you have someone that's already plugged in and knows about their
Mm-hmm.
consumer as opposed to you trying to, put together a campaign that may backfire.
Mm-hmm. And I think even with just individual network marketing teams, if you know individuals from a community, go talk to them, right?
Yeah,
Consult with them and see what is it that you really like or what is it that you really want, and then how do we translate that in a way that feels authentic to you. And so, yeah,
for
I think
sure.
it's always about talking to people and finding out what they really want.
Yep.
Yeah. So this has been a wonderful conversation, Mario. I'm so very appreciative of all of the information that you have given us. And I know that people will want to stay in touch with you. They want to stay plugged in because you have so much amazing data and knowledge about data. And we're always talking about systems and how to make sure that we understand markets and especially multicultural markets. And so tell us, what is your next big thing? How do we stay in touch with you and make sure that we plug into you in the inclusive networker community?
Yeah. So the next big thing that I've been working on is a zero party data solution. So if you're doing digital advertising, we've created personas, multicultural personas that you can actually tap into online. These are people that have shared their data with us. And so if you're buying digital ads, you can go on the trade desk, Xander, Media Math, search Think Now and audiences, and you'll see different audiences. Like we had an audience for the World Cup. We have
Mm.
audiences, um, Hispanic audiences that are interested in purchasing vehicles. Um, so that's the next big thing. In terms of staying in touch with us, our website thinknow.com. We actually provide a lot of great free resources, reports that you
Okay.
can download on our downloads page. So I recommend checking that out. We are on all the social platforms at Think Now Global. And then myself, I Mario X as an X-ray Carrasco, Carrasco. That's my handle across all socials as well.
Awesome. Well, we are so excited to stay in touch with you. And this has been so much wonderful information. And I am so very grateful that we got to share this with the Inclusive Networker audience, Mario. So thank you all for listening to this episode of the Inclusive Networker. And thank you to my fabulous guest, Mario X Carrasco. You will find his information in the show notes, and we will see you on the next episode of the Inclusive Networker. Bye.